Wowie, wowie, zowie. Here we are again. Can you believe it? It's Tuesday. I'm your jovial host, Zach Hval, singer, songwriter, guitar player extraordinaire, and you are tuning in to Musical Hangout. It is a hangout that is musical. I appreciate you tuning in to this merry evening of whatever it will be. Entertainment, I hope. Music for sure. Would appreciate it if you would hit that like button to let the algorithm know I'm doing the right thing. Would appreciate it if you would also hit that subscribe button so that I can feel good about myself in this world where sometimes not always a lot to feel good about. Would also appreciate it even more so than the other two things if you would click any of the links down below to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and what have you. But also to listen to my very own original compositions. I'm doing a lot of them tonight. I got a new one I'm doing. There's an album I did last year that we're drawing heavily from tonight, so you'll definitely want to check that out. All sorts of musical mayhem coming your way. I am this close to releasing a new single. It'll probably be out in June here. I'm gonna finish it hopefully this weekend. Came close to doing it this weekend, but some family is in town and just general laziness got the better of me. But what can I say? I don't do this for a living. I do this in my spare time, which, getting married and then, thinking about maybe having kids here in the not too distant future will be increasingly scarce. So, it's a good thing that there's a whole archive, needless to say, of musical hangouts you can go to. I'm trying to find the right guitar pick. I'll use the Jimi Hendrix one. Ladies and gentlemen, what a week, really a month it has been on the guitar community. Fake guitars coming out of the woodworks left and right, but I'm as authentic as they come, as you will soon find out, no doubt. We're going to start this evening off, this experience off, with a little bit of that green onions that we love so much. I like all forms of onions, maybe not the sweet onions. But this is Green Onions by Booker T and the MGs. Here we go. about that one and my doggone corns. I love that song. That's a fun song to play on any guitar that is shaped like this here guitar. This, of course, is the Reverend Greg Hawk Signature Gristle 90. I hope these are not real pickups, ladies and gentlemen. These are Fishman Influence Gristle Tone 90 pickups, and they do need to be charged. It is, I just now realized, as we go live, that the battery might go out on these pickups. But that's why you have, people. One time my dad asked me, how comes these guys have so many guitars on stage? And, well, the nerdy answer is, different electronics, sometimes different tunings, and different guitars handle different tunings better than other guitars. But sometimes it's just because it's cool. Sometimes you just, sometimes you start a set with a guitar and you're like, whoa, this is not going the way it was when I rehearsed it. Then you switch guitars and everything's fine. Or if you break a string and things like that, ladies and gentlemen. And, but let's not kid ourselves. Sometimes it's cool. You go to a concert and there's like a guy that's only got like one guitar. And like you're like, oh, hopefully he doesn't break a string. But then you go to other shows and like there's a whole like wall of guitars and you're like, dude, you're just showing off at this point. So there's like you got to have at least 3 on stage with you. Any less than that, and it's like you're an amateur. Any more than that, and people kind of don't take you seriously. At least at the local level. You go see like Guns N' Roses or something like that. I don't know why I mentioned that. I don't even like Guns N' Roses, but Eddie Van Halen is dead. Some other famous guitar player, Eric Johnson. There we go. I bounce back. You go see him, and he's got at least 3 guitars up there with him. No more, no less. And if anybody out there tries to tell you that Eric Johnson isn't a freaking legend or a consummate professional musician, I don't know what, They're probably fans of Giacomo Torra. In any case, that was Booker T and the MGs. They were the house band for the Stax record label back in I think from the 50s, maybe on into the 60s. They played on, for sure, some of the Albert King records that he did when he was on Stax, and that was, throughout the late 60s and 70s he was there. So highly possible, if you're listening to an Albert King recording from that time, that the backing band is, in fact, Booker T and the MGs. Of course, they had their own hits. Green Onions is one of them. Great song to play on the Telecaster-style guitar. And that will be your nerdy rant for this week. We're going to do my tune here. This is a signature tune of this very program, harkening back to 2022, when I started doing these live streams here. This is called The Sinister Shuffle. It can be found, ladies and gentlemen, your second reminder of the night at the link below, in an album called I Have No Strings and I Must Play. It goes a little something like this. The Sinister Shuffle. You know, you read these song titles and you're like, what? And then you click on it or play it on the record and you're like, oh, I get it now. It all makes sense in the general sense and in the cosmic sense, ladies and gentlemen. And that's what we're here for. It's all in the name of good, clean fun, except for when it isn't, and then things start to get really interesting. Hey, we're going to do a Roy Buchanan tune. This is a tune called Filthy Teddy. And it is not about a teddy bear. I like your style, but we're talking, of course, about the lingerie. But we don't know anything about that. We're good, clean Christian soldiers on this program here. And anyways, it can be found on his 1972 album called Roy Buchanan, the second album. You know, man, I worked so hard to come up with interesting album titles. You know, I'm still toying with the title for this next record I'm working on right now. And I've had all sorts of ideas, but, you know, there's something to be said for simplicity. You know, a lot of people just do their first albums and it's just their name. You know, Bob Dylan's first album, it's just called Bob Dylan. Led Zeppelin's first album, called Led Zeppelin. Of course, we call it Led Zeppelin 1, you know. Or sometimes you just call it Led Zeppelin, depending on what part of the neighborhood you're from. In any case, simplicity, there's something to be said for that. We remember these things, you know. But I'll probably continue to overthink these things until the end of time, and that's fine too. It's peace and love. Alrighty, Filthy Teddy goes like this. Filthy Teddy. It's always fun to just groove over those things. course, Roy Buchanan does Roy Buchanan things, and Zach Hval does Zach Hval things. Who is that? I'm Zach Hval, singer, songwriter, guitar player extraordinaire. This program that you may or may not have just stumbled across is Musical Hangout. It is a live experience, ladies and gentlemen. There is a chat box going. You can leave questions, comments, whiny, snivelly complaints, and if it's intelligible, I will read it here on the very program. But until then, we're going to do my new tune here. It is a blues shuffle in the key of D, so you're caught up here with me. And it is called A Lovely Day for a Shuffle. And I may or may not teach some concepts here. I just now thought there's something I've been doing tonight that would make an interesting mini guitar lesson. So, put a pin in that, because we are about to unleash, ladies and gentlemen, the first new song since the last time I debuted. The first new song since I debuted a song last. Now I'm confusing myself. This is called Lovely Day for a Shuffle. And if I get brave enough in the coming days and weeks, I'll record a version of it for you. But for now, Musical Hangout exclusive. Don't say I didn't give you nothing for free. so bad, not so bad. Lovely day for a shuffle, ladies and gentlemen. And that's something I wake up every morning. I think to myself, it's a good day to do a blues shuffle, ladies and gentlemen. And yes, that felt good. Not bad for a live run through. Of course, these things always feel better when you're sitting around here in your bedroom, studio, what have you. Farting around on the old 6-string, as it were. Anyway, it's made guitar lesson time. This is a little idea called comping. It's just basically improvising with chords. It will help you immensely in any blues situation where you are not the soloist. Ladies and gentlemen, you will want to definitely spend as much time, if not more time, on your rhythm chops. So some ideas there. The blues shuffle is really about the rhythm in any case. So just get behind that. And even basic chord shapes will do. You know, just doing something like that. You know, it's kind of like, the idea is to make the person that's soloing sound awesome. And so, you know, I would prefer a minimalist attempt at comping. I don't like to do anything too fancy. There are riffs and stuff like that you can do, but just taking this old D9 chord, for example, as opposed to a D7, and just and sometimes you can just slide up from like a chord up, so going from the C9 to the D9, or if I want to do a chromatic thing. That sounds cool too. So really just learning these chord voicings, number 1. Number 2, getting some rhythm behind them. And then number 3 is getting the phrasing behind them. So, you know, I like to do this hybrid picking thing, but you could just use your fingers. And that'll sound just as good too. You don't want to pick too hard. And of course, any of your classic pentatonic shapes will work for little riffs if you want to fill in. But, you know, just paying attention to that beat, especially the backbeat in blues. And, you know, the phrasing of these things, blues is just a bit behind the beat there, so it's okay if it feels just a little bit off. You know, you don't have to start necessarily on the 1, you know, but preferably somewhere on the subdivisions, like a 1 and. So yeah, comping. It's all about chords and improvising with them, much like you would in, you know, with your lead stuff. And there is your mini guitar lesson. Boy, that'll be a chore to edit later. We're going to do a Jimi Hendrix inspired jam I did on my last record. That record again is called Imaginary Songs. It is going to be the link streaming down below that says new album. You'll want to click that for that. Of course, that'll take you to whatever streaming platform of your choice. Not only will you find that album there, but every other album that I have done. This is a Jimi Hendrix inspired dealio. Again, I started out improvising with chords. That's how I came up with this melody and groove, if you will. And it's called, the song is called Mercury to Venus. It goes a little something like this. that's the rocket ship taking off. We go from Earth, past the moon. But we're not going to Mars or anything lame like that. No, we're going straight to Venus, and you're going to get burnt up by the acid rain, if I remember correctly, because I took, Mr. Hansen's 8th grade science class, so I know the order of the planets, ladies and gentlemen. We had to make dioramas in 4th grade. Does anybody remember making dioramas? Alrighty, we're gonna switch gears here to a tune of mine from way back in the day, technically during the Great Pestilence. It's a tune called Samantha's Lullaby, and it can be found on my 2021 record called Sounds. Now, that is the very first all-instrumental album I did, and it was a sort of an experimental album, so you should definitely check that out. But at any rate, this is called... Oh, actually, no, hold on. I'm wrong. This is not on the Sounds album. It's actually same year, different record, though. It's actually on The Legend of Frankie Bastone. It's the middle song. Don't know how I screwed that up. This is water that I'm drinking tonight, ladies and gentlemen. So I've had a long day at the office. In any case, Samantha's Lullaby. The album is The Legend of Frankie Bastone. All questions can be answered at the link below to listen to these things streaming, so you don't have to hear me forget things that I should know. In any case... Lullaby. Boy, I like that song. It's a nice, relaxing number. Some numbers get scary, and things like that. Of course, I'm not talking about algebra. We don't do algebra or calculus on that show. I always think it's hilarious that, people, there are kids today that aren't going into any of the science fields that are willingly taking calculus, or they're being misled into thinking that they need calculus. Now, to you, I pose the question out there in movie land. Have you ever jaywalked? If you have jaywalked, then you have done calculus. Actually, let's further expand this analogy. If you have jaywalked and not gotten hit by a car, you have successfully completed a calculus, problem. You don't need calculus, ladies and gentlemen. You ever had a problem that you didn't know the answer to, so you had to kind of work through it a little bit? Guess what? You've done algebra. The elites don't want you to know these things. They want you to stay in school and, well, actually, you should stay in school, but be suspicious of anybody that tells you you need X math, class or Y math class. It's a trick. Send no reply. Alrighty, we're going to do a fun tune of mine that came out a couple of years ago. It's called Asteroid Blues. It's not an album or anything like that, on an album or anything like that. It's just a cool song I released. And it goes like this. Another space theme. You'll see, ladies and gentlemen, if you go through my discography, and if you can't tell by the Star Wars shirt, space is a constant theme. You know, there's this song, Mercury to Venus. There's Love in Space. Who knows what spatial jams? I don't want to say Space Jam and get sued by, Bugs Bunny. But who knows what spatial jams I'll come up with in the not too distant future, ladies and gentlemen. Only time will tell. There's a whole galaxy to explore. All right, I do call myself singer-songwriter. And much like last week, didn't do a whole lot of singing. So I'm going to do one now. Tune of mine called Other Side of the Screen, found on the album called Imaginary Songs. It's a song about a problem facing the world today, and you can draw your own conclusions. Go to Hollywood. That is Other Side of the Screen. I wrote that one. That's me. A good tune. Nice, you know, the live streams, it's fun to do it on the live stream just to sing and practice my slides, but, you know, I did a really good job. I do produce my own records, ladies and gentlemen. It is me playing all of the instruments, doing all of the singing, all of the writing and everything like that. Basically the opposite of all the fake Instagram and YouTube guitarists out there. And if, you know, memes and hearsay on the internet is to be believed, I'm putting a lot more effort in than, you know, the Hollywood or Nashville music machine. So do with that what you will. At the end of the day, you know, it makes me feel good about myself. You work really hard on something. For me, God rest his soul, I kind of come out of that David Lynch school of creativity where it's not so much the finished product that I enjoy. Sure, I can objectively, you know, get past my own insecurity and realize that I made an awesome piece of art and expressed myself. But for me, the joy in doing these things is in the creativity, and I do get a lot of enjoyment out of doing these live streams. We're going to circle back around now to my I Have No Strings and I Must Play album and do the tune that closed out the album. I always like to, this is one of the ones I like to do to close out these live streams. It's called Darkness on the Face of the Deep, ladies and gentlemen, which is a reference to Genesis. No, not the Sega Genesis. No, not the band Genesis. Let me know if you prefer Phil Collins or Peter Gabriel. But in any case, it's a reference to the biblical book of Genesis. It's called Darkness on the Face of the Deep, and it does this cool ambient thing that goes like this. darkness on the face of the deep. A little apropos of our conversation on creativity, seeing as it takes its title from the creation story in the book of Genesis. In any case, folks, not quite an hour tonight, but that's okay. That's all right. We'll be back here next week, which would be the 27th of May. Holy smokes, we're almost halfway through 2025, and what a year it's been. I'm sure you've had your ups and downs already. I know I have, but we're going to keep on trucking. You know, they call me the breeze because I keep blowing down the road, ladies and gentlemen. But yes, we will be back here the 27th of May. There's, attendance on these live streams here for myself will be, spotty as the summer goes on, summer activities, trips, and all that kind of stuff. But when I can, which will probably be most Tuesdays, I will be here doing it again at 6 p.m. on the Pacific time zone. If you missed this, there's going to be there's a whole playlist of tunes. You can go back and watch the very beginning, the very first live stream, this live stream, a different live stream, whatever your heart desires, ladies and gentlemen. There's a whole playlist of that. Again, I would appreciate it if you would hit the like button, the subscribe button, follow me on the social media and everything like that to stay up to date on all things Zach. There will be new music and new videos and everything like that coming very soon. I just got to sit down and actually do it, and more importantly, find time to do it. That's all I have for you this week, ladies and gentlemen. Until next time, I'm Zach Hval, singer, songwriter, guitar player extraordinaire, signing off, reminding you that discourse is fleeting, but junk mail is forever. Bread is bread, cheese is cheese. Praise God. Let's see. Oh, here's a good joke. So, a ship wrecks onto a desert island, and all that survive is two men and a woman, and they don't really have anything to do besides eat and sleep, so they spend the time just having sex. Well, the young lady eventually gets sick and dies, and the men don't really know what to do with themselves, so they continue to have sex. Well, after a couple of days, they start to feel guilty, so they bury her. All right, next time, folks. Have a good night.